Before empires wrote their laws or bread was baked in stone hearths, humanity discovered a quiet miracle: the transformation of perishable life into eternal sustenance. Cheese is not merely food. It is geography captured in fat and protein, a living treaty between human patience, animal vitality, and invisible kingdoms of microbes. Long before we understood the microscope, billions of unseen architects were already building civilizations of flavor inside wooden pails and leather pouches. Within these dark, subterranean cathedrals, time ceases to destroy. It begins to compose. This is the story of milk turned to stone, pasture captured in crystal, and the ancient alchemy of cheese. Over 9,000 years ago, across the arid steppes of the Fertile Crescent, nomadic pastoralists made an accidental discovery that would reshape human survival. Stored inside canteens fashioned from ruminant stomachs, raw milk met active enzymes preserved within the dried tissue. The enzyme chymosin cleaved the protective proteins of the milk, causing curds to sever violently from the clear, watery whey. In Kujawia, Poland, fragments of perforated pottery dating back 7 millennia confirm our ancestors were deliberately separating curds from lactose-rich whey. Adult humans were ancestrally lactose intolerant. By fermenting milk into cheese, ancient humans removed the sugar and unlocked an enduring, transportable source of dense protein resource. Great cheese is born long before milk leaves the udder. It begins in the soil, the altitude, and the biodiversity of the pasture. Terroir is not a myth. The volatile terpenes and fatty acids within these high-altitude herbs pass unaltered into the animal's bloodstream and milk fat. Heritage breeds like the Montbéliard and Simmental are living bioreactors, bred over centuries to yield milk with the precise casein to fat balance needed for hard curds. Every spring, the ritual of transhumance drives herds thousands of feet upward to graze on pastures free of industrial feed, pesticides, and pollution. In these isolated chalets, cheesemaking was born not as a luxury, but as the only way to store the fleeting summer abundance of milk for long, lethal winters. Raw milk emerges at body temperature, teeming with biodiversity, native lactobacilli, micrococci, and beneficial wild yeasts unique to this exact mountain cabin. Fresh milk is a fragile emulsion, 87% water, carrying suspended globes of fat and dense bundles of protein held together by calcium glue. Far from sterile, traditional wooden tools like the French gerle act as living microbial libraries, inoculating fresh milk with protective flora before pathogens can take hold. Terroir is not exclusive to high mountains. In the volcanic wetlands of Campania, the dense, calcium-rich milk of the water buffalo creates a curd of entirely different potential. Here on the wind-scoured limestone plateaus of southern France, Lacaune sheep produce milk with double the fat and protein of bovine herds, liquid velvet, primed for mold. Capric milk brings short-chain fatty acids, caproic, caprylic, capric, yielding the sharp, peppery acidity synonymous with classic goat cheese. Traditional hard cheeses often rely on evening milk left to cool overnight. As the cream rises, anaerobic bacteria begin converting sugars in the depths below. By balancing the fat-to-protein ratio through skimming, the cheesemaker dictates whether the final wheel will become an unctuous brie or a monolithic, ageless Parmigiano. Morning meets evening. High acidity balances raw fat. The biological clock of cheesemaking begins its irreversible countdown. No laboratory additives are needed. The cheesemaker inoculates the vat using Siero Inesto, an unbroken biological chain of starter culture preserved across generations. In minutes, the milk becomes a battlefield, Native acid-loving bacteria multiply exponentially, dropping the pH and creating an environment where decay organisms cannot survive. Copper is not merely traditional, it is chemically essential. It conducts heat with surgical uniformity and sheds trace ions that stabilize the curd's developing protein matrix. Long before digital probes existed, the master's forearm was the most sophisticated sensor on Earth, calibrated to detect fractions of a degree. Now comes the catalyst, natural rennet, harvested and prepared with precise artisan care to initiate the coagulation miracle. In the Iberian Mountains, cheesemakers turned to the plant kingdom, extracting cardassian enzymes from wild cardoon thistles to craft uniquely floral, luscious sheep cheeses. The vat is stilled. Any movement now would fracture the fragile developing chains. Silence descends upon the dairy. Naturally, milk proteins refuse to clump. They are guarded by hairy molecular bristles carrying negative charges that violently repel one another. Rennet acts like molecular shears. It slices away the protective bristles, stripping the proteins of their electrical armor. The microscopic lattice turns opaque white, resolving into the solid surface of the curd vat. The master performs the ancient test. The split is pristine. The whey is clear. The curd is ready for the blade. Now, the monolith must be destroyed to be reborn. The size of the cut determines the destiny of the cheese. Large cuts yield soft, luscious cheeses like camembert. But for hard, long-aging wheels, the curd must be cut down to the size of wheat grains. By multiplying the surface area millions of times, moisture is forced to flee the protein matrix at astonishing speed. The fire is stoked. The master raises the heat to 55 degrees Celsius, a deliberate thermal trial that separates moisture from protein. This is syneresis. Heat forces the protein network to tighten like a biological fist, driving out water while locking fat safely within its grip. The stirring is relentless. If the grains settle for even a second, they will fuse into an uneven mass, ruining the uniform texture of the wheel. Through touch alone, the master knows the grains are cooked to their structural core, elastic, firm, and ready to unite. Stirring ceases. In the quiet depths of the cauldron, the grains settle and knit together, forming a massive, continuous body beneath a sea of golden whey. With ancient dexterity, a coarse linen cloth is swept under the mass, cradling the newly born curd without breaking its delicate, forming structure. 45 kilograms of pure, unpressed cheese emerge from the broth, steaming, fragile, and fiercely alive. Divided into twin halves, each mass will become an independent 60-kilogram wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano, each with its own individual destiny. Dropped into the circular mold, the curd begins to take its iconic wheel shape under the artisan's forceful palms. Mechanical pressure now completes what heat began. Tons of force drive out remaining pockets of air, fusing the grains into a monolithic, indestructible wheel. Every few hours, the wheel is flipped and redressed in dry linen. Symmetry is paramount. An unevenly pressed wheel will crack and rot in the cellar. The cheese receives its passport. The embossed rind guarantees its genealogy, dairy number, and exact date of birth to the world. In Somerset, England, an entirely different alchemy evolved: cheddaring. Here, curds are repeatedly sliced, stacked, and turned to stretch the protein strands. High acidity demineralizes the calcium bonds, allowing protein balls to uncoil and align into parallel sheets,
creating cheddar's legendary, dense, flaky crumb. The stretched slabs are fed into the mill, torn into irregular fragments to prepare maximum surface area for the universal preservative, salt. Salt is the brake pedal of cheese chemistry. It halts the runaway acid production of bacteria, regulates moisture, and protects the newborn cheese from decay. In southern Italy, curd undergoes a baptism of boiling water. Pasta filata, the stretched curd that gives birth to mozzarella and provolone.
Under heat and tension, proteins align into continuous microscopic pipelines. This structural alignment allows the cheese to melt and stretch without losing its fat. Mozzatura, the pinch. From this single decisive gesture, mozzarella takes its name, locking its porcelain skin before the rich interior can bleed away. For blue cheeses, life is introduced through the botanical kingdom. Ancient bakers left rye loaves in damp caves until Penicillium roqueforti consumed the crumb. Unlike hard wheels, blue curd is never pressed. It must remain full of fissures and hollows, chambers of oxygen where the mold can breathe and conquer. Nothing is wasted in the sacred economy of the dairy. The discarded whey is reheated to near boiling. Ricotta, literally recooked.
The result is pure albumin, delicate, sweet, and devoid of casein. The dairy has extracted every last molecule of nourishment from the milk. After 24 hours of pressing, the mold is stripped away. The liquid milk has officially taken on solid, architectural form. The young wheel is plunged into a saturated saltwater bath. Because dense brine has a higher specific gravity than cheese, the massive wheel floats like an iceberg. Osmosis takes command. The saturated brine pulls water out of the cheese's exterior layers, driving salt inward to construct a durable, hardened armor. For nearly a month, the wheels float in this cold, salty suspension, flipped daily to ensure the salt penetrates with absolute structural symmetry. In medieval monasteries, monks bathed wheels in beer, wine, and brandies. They were not seasoning the cheese, they were engineering a microbial shield. Brevibacterium linens thrives in this salty, damp bath. It paints the rind in vivid shades of ochre and orange, producing the pungent, barnyard aromas prized by connoisseurs. Across the Loire Valley, young goat cheeses like Valençay are dusted with vegetable ash. The alkaline carbon neutralizes surface acid, inviting delicate bloomy molds to take root. Within 10 days, Penicillium camemberti weaves its snowy mantle. This living white skin will breathe, consume acid, and digest the hard proteins beneath. Ripening is centripetal. From the outside in, the mold's enzymes dismantle the rigid protein scaffolding, transforming chalky curd into unctuous, flowing cream. Mont d'Or is bound in freshly harvested spruce bark. The wood does not merely hold the liquefying cheese together, it infuses the paste with pine resins and woodland tannins. In the wet Basque valleys, shepherds preserved their sheep cheeses over hearth fires of beech and oak, curing the rind with smoke to ward off excessive mold. To conquer the high seas, Dutch merchants entombed their cheeses in wax. Hermetically sealed from oxygen and insects, Edam traveled the globe as edible currency. Without air, blue mold cannot wake. Stainless steel needles puncture the wheel, creating breathing chimneys that draw oxygen deep into the dark, sealed interior. Oxygen floods the darkness. Dormant spores ignite into life, carving breathtaking turquoise rivers of flavor through the creamy alabaster paste. We leave the daylight behind. We enter the realm of affinage, the silent subterranean womb where raw curd is tempered into immortal gastronomy. These caves breathe. Geological fractures called fluorines act as giant natural lungs, inhaling mountain air and exhaling the exact humidity required for mold to flourish. At Fort de Rousse, 50,000 square meters of subterranean military masonry now house over 100,000 wheels of Comté, the largest cheese cathedral on Earth. The wood is not inert. Local spruce planks act as living sponges, regulating moisture and inoculating every resting wheel with centuries of resident terroir. An affineur does not merely store cheese. He listens to it. He reads its maturation with the sensitivity of a physician diagnosing a living patient.
The hammer never lies. A true master can hear an internal fissure or gas bubble the size of a pea, hidden 40 centimeters deep inside the solid paste. The trier reveals the soul of the wheel. A single cylinder reveals aroma, color gradient, elasticity, and the density of crystalline development. In a single breath, he detects roasted hazelnuts, damp cellar earth, browned butter, and the sharp pineapple notes of volatile butyric esters. The plug is replaced. The wound is sealed. The wheel returns to its slumber, undisturbed for another 12 months of dark maturation. Where monks once rubbed every wheel by hand, precision robotics now assist, ensuring hundreds of thousands of wheels receive their vital brine wash without fail. The morge is the living armor of the cheese. This cultivated bacterial broth consumes bitter compounds and protects the delicate paste from invasive mold toxins. Deep within the paste, proteolysis unfolds. Over years, enzymes shatter tasteless protein chains into free amino acids, the fundamental building blocks of savory flavor. This is the genesis of umami. Aging is the deliberate concentration of natural glutamate, creating the profound, mouth-watering savoriness that defines great vintage cheese. As water evaporates, the amino acid tyrosine can no longer remain dissolved. It precipitates, nucleating into the beloved crunchy crystals that crown an aged masterpiece. Often mistaken for mold, these white blooms are calcium lactate, proof of an active, vibrant acid breakdown over years of patient, unhurried aging.
In Valsassina's mountain caves, the cool breath of the subterranean Alps nurtures gorgonzola, balancing sweet curd against the sharp bite of aggressive blue mold. On wheels of French mimolette, millions of microscopic cheese mites are intentionally cultivated. They bore air tunnels through the crust, allowing the paste to aerate and mature. The result is a cheese that looks like an ancient, cratered meteorite on the outside, yet hides a blazing interior of bright annatto-stained orange paste. Annatto was originally added to simulate the rich yellow hue of summer grass-fed milk. Today, it remains an iconic visual signature of classic historical varieties. The legendary eyes of Swiss cheese are not imperfections. They are the architectural footprints of a unique bacterium, Propionobacterium freudenreichi.
During their stay in warm fermentation cellars, these bacteria consume lactic acid, exhaling carbon dioxide that inflates perfectly round pressurized gas domes within the elastic curd. When an aged alpine wheel weeps, releasing droplets of concentrated moisture into its eyes, the affineur knows the cheese has reached its absolute pinnacle of ripeness. High in the Picos de Europa, Cabrales ages in caves so damp that mold does not need to be inoculated. The ancient, saturated stone breathes blue spores directly onto the raw curd. Wrapping in damp sycamore leaves preserves moisture in the harsh mountain winds, imparting tannin bitterness and a woodland aroma to the fiery, sharp blue paste inside.
In August, wheels are buried in deep sandstone pits lined with straw, then sealed hermetically with plaster for 90 days of violent anaerobic fermentation.
Deprived of oxygen, the cheeses sweat out fat and warp into distorted, rugged shapes, developing an intense, haunting flavor of truffles, damp earth, and toasted forest wood. Aged for years, Gouda ceases to be an ordinary cheese. It becomes brockelkaas, brittle, crystalline, and packed with notes of burnt caramel, bourbon, and toasted walnut. Lipolysis dismantles milk fats into free fatty acids. This enzymatic breakdown generates the fiery, peppery bite of aged provolone and the complex, gamey notes of aged pecorino. Washing with high-proof Marc de Bourgogne brandy shocks competing molds while feeding the red-orange bacterial rind, yielding a paste so pungent it was once banned on French public transit. Geotrichum candidum is the great unifier. It weaves a delicate, wrinkled, brain-like mantle, neutralizing harsh surface acids and paving the way for secondary molds to bloom.
The single rye straw through the center of St. Maur is not decorative. It acts as a structural spine to prevent the fragile, delicate goat log from snapping in two during handling. Traditional English cheddars are wrapped in lard-soaked cotton bandages. This allows the wheel to lose moisture and breathe over years without shattering its brittle paste. To the untrained eye, it looks like garden compost, but beneath this living, wild fungal jacket rests an amber paste of incomparable hazelnut, horseradish, and iron richness. In the 20th century, industrialization introduced block aging in plastic film, efficient and uniform, but stripping the cheese of its dialogue with wood, stone, and wild flora. Over 2 years, a 40-kilogram wheel loses up to 5 liters of water to the cellar air. What remains is an indestructible concentration of protein, fat, and intense flavor. When winter breaks, the cheeses descend the mountain. Having matured through the freezing alpine winter, the wheels are ready to face the judgment of the guilds. Beaufort's iconic inward-curving rim was engineered for transport. It allowed pairs of wheels to be lashed securely to pack-horse saddles without slipping off sheer cliff paths. Matured on rye straw beds in volcanic cellars, Saint Nectaire develops a mosaic of colorful wild flora that produces the distinct aroma of damp cellars and wild forest mushrooms. Every wheel is an individual, with its own biography. For centuries, affineurs maintained detailed ledgers documenting the exact environmental conditions of every single batch. The transformation is complete. The fragile milk of a single summer morning has conquered time, emerging 36 months later as a monument of human craft and biological alchemy. To protect these living monuments from industrial forgery, humanity created secular priesthoods, the cheese guilds, and protected designations of origin. Every single weir of Parmigiano Reggiano must face the consortio's hammer at 12 months. There are no random samples. Every wheel is individually judged. Pass the test, and the wheel receives the brand of fire, the indelible mark of perfection. Fail, and its name is stripped away forever. If a wheel contains even a microscopic internal crack, it is spiancato. Its rind is scored and scarred, stripping it of its heritage to protect the honor of the guild. In 1411, King Charles VI granted the citizens of Roquefort a monopoly on cheese aged in their caves. It was the world's first true protected designation of origin. Today, the European Union's PDO label represents the ultimate legal defense of terroir, a guarantee that food cannot be divorced from its ancestral landscape. The distinctive herringbone pattern on Manchego rinds pays homage to the ancient Esparto grass belts
once used to press sheep's curds across the windswept plains of La Mancha. For decades, a quiet war raged between industrial sanitization and biological heritage. Pasteurization kills pathogens, but it also executes the native microflora that create greatness. Authentic Camembert de Normandie AOP mandates raw milk poured in 5 distinct layers with a manual ladle. Any shortcut strips the cheese of its right to the name. Real feta is not cow's milk cubes in plastic tubs. By European law, it must contain at least 70% sheep's milk, aged in brine-filled beechwood barrels.
The porous beechwood staves allow microoxygenation, tempering the sharp, salty sheep's curd into a rich, crumbly paste with a clean, peppery finish. Only 3 producers still craft authentic West Country farmhouse cheddar in Somerset, using unpasteurized milk from their own herds and traditional cloth-bound aging. From fresh, sweet Prosciutto to rock-hard aged d'Allevo, Asiago represents a spectrum of maturation defended fiercely against international industrial imitations. High in the Sierra de Jalmich, authentic cotija is crafted only during the rainy season when cows feed on wild mountain grasses, yielding a dry, salty, irreplaceable grating cheese. In Brazil's Serra da Canastra, artisanal producers fought for legal recognition of their raw milk heritage, preserving an unbroken 300-year-old culinary tradition.
Only 2 people on Earth know the complete recipe for the herbal wash applied to Appenzeller, a closely guarded proprietary botanical blend unchanged for 7 centuries. Separated only by a national border on the same mountain ridge, France and Switzerland maintain separate PDOs for their iconic winter spruce-wrapped delicacy. Norway's brunost defies typical classification. By boiling whey until the milk sugars caramelize, makers create an intensely sweet, fudge-like brown staple born of thrift. Legend says Roger the Norman ordered his cheesemakers to add saffron to cure his wife's melancholy. Thus was born Sicily's radiant, golden Piacentino Inese. Hand-woven rush baskets leave their permanent fingerprint on the rind, a biological signature of Sicilian basket-weaving traditions preserved since antiquity. In the hands of a master, stretched curd becomes sculpture. The Treccia braid represents the absolute pinnacle of manual dexterity in the pasta filata world. Sardinia's casu marzu represents the extreme frontier of biological breakdown, banned by modern food safety agencies, yet preserved as an ancestral cultural artifact. In Cyprus, halloumi is simmered in hot whey, denaturing its protein so thoroughly that it can be seared directly over open coals without ever melting. At 5,000 meters, Tibetan nomads craft chirpi from yak milk. Smoked and dried until rock hard, it can be chewed for hours, sustaining life across freezing mountain passes. For over 6 centuries, cheesemakers have made pilgrimages to the Pass of San Lucio, honoring the patron saint who transformed the craft of curd into an act of sacred charity.
In the late 20th century, a counter-revolution was born. Across the Americas, a new generation of artisan makers reclaimed raw milk, pasture biodiversity, and traditional affinage. Facilities like the cellars at Jasper Hill represent the modern synthesis, cathedral-scale subterranean aging supported by genomic sequencing and precise microbial management. The defense of cheese is the defense of human biodiversity. Every wheel of traditional cheese preserves an unbroken biological and cultural lineage that industrial monoculture cannot replace. Modern genomics has not debunked terroir, it has validated it. DNA sequencing reveals that traditional dairies harbor complex microbial ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth. They are the guardians of the invisible. Through centuries of plague, war, and industrial modernization, they kept the sacred flame of fermentation alive.
To taste cheese correctly is to conduct a sensory excavation. We move chronologically from fresh lactic simplicity to crystalline, subterranean complexity. In the grammar of cheese cutting, the nose, the pointed center, is never amputated. Every cut must share the journey from the young interior to the fully ripened rind. Cold is the enemy of flavor. As the cheese reaches 20 degrees Celsius, trapped milk fats liquefy, unlocking hundreds of volatile aromatic compounds previously frozen in fat. The eyes read the first chapter, the ivory hue of winter milk versus the deep beta-carotene gold of summer pasture, the tight crumb of acid versus the glossy sheen of proteolysis. Texture is structure. Is it chalky, supple, granitic, or unctuous? The fingers register the exact mechanical breakdown achieved by months of microbial labor.
True taste occurs in the nose. As the cheese warms on the tongue, chewing pumps volatile molecules up the retronasal canal, igniting the brain with memories of earth, grass, and butter. Phase 1 is lactic, clean, bright, and citrusy. Fresh cheeses offer the pure, unadulterated taste of milk sugar, clean water, and fresh pasture. Bloomy rinds introduce the forest floor. Penicillium camemberti digests butterfat, yielding luxurious textures reminiscent of whipped butter and fresh cellar mushrooms. High acidity and effervescence act as a culinary blade. The bubbles scrub the tongue clean of heavy fat, resetting the taste buds for the next stage of complexity. With aged alpine cheeses, we encounter the Maillard echoes: browned butter, toasted hazelnuts, roasted onions, and the savory richness of slowly caramelized broth.
The bite delivers the legendary crunch. It is not grit or sand. It is pure, crystallized protein shattering between the teeth, instantly dissolving into rich, savory broth. Washed rinds deliver the paradox of cheese, an exterior aroma of barnyard, wet leather, and funk that gives way to a sweet, milky, surprisingly delicate interior paste. Blue cheese is an explosion of methyl ketones, sharp, peppery, and metallic. Penicillium mold pierces the palate with electric intensity, tempered only by rich sheep's cream. The classic pairing is a masterclass in chemical diplomacy. The intense, piercing salt of the blue mold is embraced and neutralized by the lush, noble rot sweetness of sauternes. Pairing is governed by two laws: contrast or harmony. We either use acid to cut through dense fat, or mirror caramelized amino acids with toasted nuts and sweet fruit pastes.
Modern sensory science has cataloged over 600 distinct volatile compounds in aged milk. No single lab-engineered food comes close to this molecular complexity. Melting is a phase transition. At 32 degrees Celsius, solid butterfat turns to liquid. At 65 degrees, the casein bonds soften, allowing the cheese to flow like lava. The iconic cheese pull relies on calcium bridges. If too much calcium is lost to acid, the cheese melts into oil. If too little is lost, it refuses to stretch. Fondue is a tightrope walk of food science. Wine's tartaric acid binds excess calcium, preventing the proteins from seizing into a rubbery clump and ensuring a silky emulsion. The 21st century introduces precision fermentation, programming microflora to brew real dairy caseins without cows, challenging our very definition of farming and terroir.
In response to synthetic biology, traditional artisans doubled down on raw biodiversity, arguing that true cheese is an unreplicable record of soil, pasture, weather, and animal life. Preserving cheese means preserving the genetic heritage of ancient cattle, sheep, and goats, bred specifically for rugged landscapes rather than industrial volume. From Tokyo to New York, The appreciation of traditional cheese has become a global language, a shared reverence for slow food, historical craftsmanship, and biological mastery. In the hands of a master chef, cheese is not an ingredient. It is a profound seasoning, the ultimate concentration of natural salt, acid, and umami. Look closely at the aged wheel. Within its dense, crystalline architecture, the memory of that summer morning milk still lives, captured, transformed, and preserved against decay.
10,000 years of human ingenuity, microbial evolution, and geological time converge within a single wheel of cheese. In a world obsessed with speed and synthetic convenience, cheese remains a defiant monument to patience, proof that some of humanity's greatest creations cannot be rushed. We did not invent cheese. We partnered with nature. We built the shelters, stoked the fires, and carved the vaults. But the true architects were always the invisible kingdoms of life. It is our oldest living treaty with the natural world, the conversion of grass and sunlight into an enduring treasure that outlasts the seasons and defies decay. From raw pasture to subterranean cathedral, cheese is the poetry of milk, written by the hand of time.